Daddy, I'm so alone. I don't have anything anymore. All I do is sit and look at my phone and think of all the terrible things that I've done, and then I go to work, and then I drink, and then I come home to no one, and I sit and I think about all the terrible things I've done again and again, and I go
Stop.
crazy.
We all have things that we regret.
No, but I have so many.
People are terrified of being alone, and that fear controls far more of their life than they realize. It influences the relationships they enter, the standards they lower, the opportunities they miss, and the amount of disrespect they tolerate. They cling to people, conversations, validation, and constant noise because silence forces them to confront something they have spent years avoiding: themselves. That is why loneliness feels uncomfortable. Not because being alone is the problem, because being alone removes distractions. When there is nobody to impress, nobody to entertain you, and nobody available to constantly fill the empty spaces, you are left face to face with your habits, your excuses, your weaknesses, and your unfinished responsibilities. Most people would rather stay busy than face that reality. That is exactly why they remain stuck. Because growth rarely happens in crowds. Discipline is built alone. Character is built alone. Mental toughness is built alone. The strongest version of yourself is not created when everybody is cheering for you. It is created during the moments when nobody is watching, nobody is encouraging you, and nobody is coming to rescue you. Those are the moments that reveal whether your standards are real or whether they only exist when other people are around. The brutal truth is that if you cannot handle your own company, you will spend your life becoming dependent on everyone else's. You will need constant approval to feel valuable, constant attention to feel important, constant validation to feel secure. And dependence is weakness. Because the moment your peace depends on other people, your life is no longer under your control. This is why learning to be alone is not isolation, it is training. Training yourself to become mentally independent. Training yourself to operate without applause. Training yourself to remain focused even when nobody notices. And that is where real strength begins.
Do you feel alone right now?
I mean, I'd like to believe I'm not, but I've just never seen any proof, so I just don't debate it anymore, you know? It's like, I could spend my whole life debating it over and over again, weighing the pros and cons, and in the end, I still wouldn't have any proof, so I just don't debate it anymore. It's absurd.
The search for God is absurd.
It is if everyone dies alone.
Does that scare you?
I don't want to be alone.
One of the most dangerous habits a person can develop is the inability to sit alone with their own thoughts. Most people never realize how dependent they have become on constant stimulation because modern life gives them endless ways to avoid themselves. The moment silence appears, they reach for a screen. The moment boredom arrives, they search for entertainment. The moment discomfort surfaces, they look for an escape. And that pattern creates weakness. Because every time you run from silence, you run from self-examination. Every time you fill every empty moment with noise, you lose another opportunity to understand who you are becoming. Most people know more about celebrities, strangers, trends, and gossip than they know about their own habits, their own weaknesses, and their own potential. That is a problem. Because a person who never examines himself eventually becomes controlled by impulses he does not understand. He reacts instead of deciding. He follows urges instead of standards. He drifts through life without direction because he has never spent enough time alone to honestly evaluate where he is going. This is why solitude is powerful. Solitude strips away distractions and exposes reality. When you are alone, there is nobody to blame for your lack of discipline, nobody to entertain you, nobody to distract you from responsibilities that have been sitting unfinished for months or even years. The truth becomes visible. You start noticing the promises you keep breaking to yourself. You start noticing the goals you keep talking about but never pursuing. You start noticing how much potential is being wasted through hesitation, excuses, and avoidance. Most people fear that moment. Strong people use it because solitude gives you something that noise never can: clarity. And clarity is dangerous. Once you see the truth about your habits, your standards, and your direction, excuses become harder to believe. You can no longer pretend you are making progress when you are standing still. You can no longer hide behind busyness when your priorities are out of order. That is why being alone is not punishment. It is preparation. Preparation for becoming someone who does not require constant validation, constant attention, or constant approval to operate at a high level. Because the strongest people are not those who need the crowd. They are the ones who remain disciplined without it.
You feel like you're alone, Will?
What?
Do you have a soulmate?
Do I have to define that?
Somebody who challenges you.
There comes a point in every person's life where they discover a truth that completely changes how they see the world. Not everyone who walks beside you is meant to stay beside you. Not every friendship is meant to last forever. Not every relationship is meant to survive your growth. And the faster you accept that reality, the faster you stop making decisions out of fear. Because fear of being alone causes people to tolerate things they would never otherwise accept. They tolerate disrespect because they fear isolation. They tolerate mediocrity because they fear standing apart. They tolerate toxic environments because they fear starting over. And little by little, that fear begins shaping their entire life. This is where many people make a devastating mistake. They confuse company with connection. Just because people are around you does not mean they are helping you grow. Just because a room is full does not mean your life is moving forward. In fact, some of the biggest setbacks people experience come from surrounding themselves with individuals who reinforce weakness, reward excuses, and normalize low standards. That is why growth often feels lonely, not because success requires isolation, because growth forces separation. As your standards rise, fewer people understand your decisions. As your discipline increases, fewer people relate to your priorities. As your focus sharpens, distractions become less attractive, and many of the people attached to those distractions naturally drift away. Most people see that as a loss. It is not. It is filtration. Because every level of growth requires a different version of you, and that version cannot always carry the same habits, the same excuses, and sometimes not even the same people. That reality is uncomfortable, but comfort has never been the objective. Strength is. The strongest individuals learn how to walk alone when necessary. They do not abandon their principles to gain approval. They do not lower their standards to avoid criticism. They do not sacrifice their future simply because the journey becomes lonely. Because they understand something most people never learn. Temporary loneliness is far less dangerous than permanent regret. And the people who build extraordinary lives eventually become comfortable with a truth that terrifies average people. Being alone is not the enemy. Becoming dependent on others is. At some point, you must make a decision that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You must decide whether your future will be built around growth or built around comfort. Because the truth is that many people are not afraid of failure. They are afraid of being alone with the responsibility required to succeed. That is why they keep surrounding themselves with noise. Noise protects excuses. Noise protects weakness. Noise protects procrastination. As long as there are enough distractions, enough conversations, enough entertainment, and enough people around, they never have to confront the reality of how much potential they are wasting. But eventually, reality collects its debt. Years pass, opportunities disappear, potential fades. And one day, They are forced to look at a life that never became what it could have been. Not because they lacked ability, because they lacked the courage to stand alone long enough to build it. The people who transform their lives understand something different. They understand that solitude is not where dreams die. Solitude is where they are built. It is where discipline is forged. It is where standards are established. It is where excuses lose their power because there is nobody left to hide behind. That is why being alone becomes a competitive advantage. While everyone else is seeking validation, you are building competence. While everyone else is chasing attention, you are developing discipline. While everyone else is looking for comfort, you are constructing a version of yourself that does not require constant approval to operate. And that changes everything. Because the moment you stop needing people to motivate you, validate you, entertain you, or save you, you become dangerous in the right way. Your actions become driven by standards rather than opinions. Your decisions become driven by purpose rather than approval. That is where real freedom begins. Not when everybody believes in you, not when everybody supports you, but when you become strong enough to continue moving forward, even when nobody is there.